She was 23 and she had nowhere left to go. Not the kind of nowhere that feels temporary, but the kind that settles into your chest and stays there. No family calling her back, no savings left to stretch another week. Just a small canvas bag, a cracked phone, and $10 that felt like the last piece of her life she could still control. And with that $10, she bought something no one else wanted. A desert cabin shed, half buried in dust, sitting alone under a sky too wide for comfort. And somewhere beneath that dry, silent ground, something had been waiting. Something she was never meant to uncover. Before we continue, if stories like this mean something to you, hit subscribe and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. We love seeing how far these stories travel. Her name was Mara Ellis. She had grown up in a place where the air always smelled faintly of salt and rust. A small coastal town where people stayed because leaving felt harder than staying. Her mother worked nights at a motel, cleaning rooms no one remembered. Her father had been around in pieces. Some years he stayed. Some years he disappeared. By the time Mara was 12, she stopped expecting consistency from anyone. The only steady presence in her life had been her grandfather. He lived in a narrow wooden house at the edge of town, filled with old tools and quiet patience. He spoke slowly, like every word had to earn its place. He did not give long advice. He showed things: how to fix a broken hinge, how to read the sky before a storm, how to sit in silence without feeling empty. When she was a child, he used to take her walking along the shoreline just before sunset. Not to collect anything, not to talk much, just to watch. Once, when she asked him what they were doing, he told her that most people miss the important things because they are always looking for something loud. He said the world hides its real answers in quiet places. She did not fully understand it then, but she remembered it. He passed away when she was 17. No warning. Just a morning that felt heavier than the others and a house that stopped breathing. After that, everything shifted. Her mother worked more. Mara worked wherever she could. Grocery store, cleaning jobs, anything that paid enough to keep things from falling apart completely. But things still slipped. At 23, the argument that had been building for years finally broke. It was not one big moment. It was many small ones stacked together. Words said in anger. Doors closed harder than usual. And then silence. The kind that tells you there is nothing left to fix. That was how she found herself walking alone, with nowhere to return to. For days, she moved without direction. Cheap motels when she could afford them. Bus stations when she could not. The money got thinner. The nights got longer. She found the listing in a place most people would not notice. A pinned sheet on a dusty board inside a rural gas station far from the highway. County liquidation sale. Abandoned structures. Most of it was land no one wanted. Broken sheds. Empty lots. And then there was one line that held her attention. Desert cabin shed. 1 unit. $10. No photo. Just coordinates. She stood there longer than she should have. Something about it felt familiar in a way she could not explain. Not safe, but certain. The next morning, she used the last of her money to get as close as she could by bus. The rest, she walked. The landscape changed slowly. Buildings faded into distance. Roads narrowed into gravel. Then into sand. The air became dry, almost sharp. The sky stretched wider than she had ever seen, empty and endless. By late afternoon, she reached it. The cabin shed stood alone, surrounded by nothing but low desert brush and silence. The wood was faded to a pale gray. The roof sagged slightly at one corner. It looked like it had been waiting a long time for someone who never came back. She approached slowly. The door creaked open with a soft resistance, as if it had not been touched in years. Inside, there was almost nothing. A broken table, a rusted lantern hanging from a nail. Dust settled in every corner. The air carried a faint smell of dry earth and old wood. It should have felt empty, but it did not. There was a weight in the silence, something just beneath it. She stayed that night inside the cabin, sitting against the wall, knees pulled close, listening to the quiet. The kind of quiet that does not comfort you right away. It waits. It watches. The next morning, she stepped outside and looked at the land around her. Endless. Still. No clear direction. No movement. And yet something told her to stay. She began with small things. Clearing dust. Opening the window to let light in. Moving the broken table to one side. It was not about fixing the place. It was about giving herself something to do. Hours passed slowly. Then she noticed it. Near the back corner of the cabin floor, the ground looked slightly uneven. Not obvious. Just enough to feel wrong once you saw it. She stepped closer. The surface felt harder there, like something had been packed down and left untouched. She knelt and brushed away the thin layer of dust. Beneath it, the outline became clearer. A square. Subtle, but intentional. Her breath slowed. Why would someone bury something here? Why leave it behind? She sat back, hands resting on her knees, not touching it yet. The thought stayed with her the rest of the day. That night the wind picked up slightly, moving across the open land in long, soft waves. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening. By morning, she knew she could not ignore it. She began digging with what she had. A small metal piece she found near the wall. It took time. The ground was dry but compact. Each movement slow, careful. After what felt like hours, the edge of something solid appeared. A wooden surface. Her hands trembled slightly as she cleared more dirt away. It was a box. Small, but heavy. Worn by time, but still intact. She lifted it out and set it on the cabin floor. For a moment, she just looked at it. Then she opened it. Inside were 3 things. A leather-bound journal, the edges softened by years of use. The pages filled with writing that shifted from neat to uneven over time. A small cloth pouch tied with a thin cord. Inside, a handful of coins and a simple silver ring. And a folded piece of paper, aged but carefully preserved. She reached for the paper last. Her fingers paused for a second before unfolding it. The writing was slow, thoughtful, like each word had been chosen with care. It spoke of a woman who had lived in that cabin many years before, someone who had come there to escape a life that no longer felt like her own, someone who had believed that distance could quiet the noise inside her. At first, it had not worked. The silence had felt too heavy, too empty. But over time, she began to understand it. She wrote about learning to sit with herself, to listen instead of running, to notice small things. The way light changed across the ground, the way the wind moved before a storm, the way loneliness could soften into something quieter if you stayed long enough. She wrote that the box was not meant to be hidden forever. It was meant to be found by someone who needed it, not for the coins, not for the ring, but for the understanding. At the end, she wrote that if someone was reading this, it meant they had reached a point where they could no longer go back to who they were before, and that maybe, just maybe, that was not something to fear. Mara read the letter twice, then again. Something inside her shifted, not suddenly, not dramatically, but enough. She looked around the cabin, at the worn wood, the quiet space, the ground that had held this story for years. It did not feel empty anymore. It felt like it had been waiting. In the days that followed, she stayed, not because she had a plan, but because leaving did not feel right. She began reading the journal slowly, a few pages each day. The words felt familiar in a way she could not explain. Different life. Same silence. She started writing in the back pages. Not much, just small things. What she noticed, what she felt, what she remembered. Time moved differently there. The mornings were quiet and soft. The afternoons stretched long under the sun. The nights brought a kind of stillness she had never known before. Weeks passed. She fixed small things in the cabin, strengthened the door, cleared more space, made it livable. Once in a while, someone from a distant town passed by. A truck in the distance, a figure walking along the horizon. Slowly, she became less invisible. One afternoon, an older man stopped near the cabin and asked if she needed water. She nodded. He came back the next day with a container and a few simple tools. It started like that. Small connections. No pressure. No expectations. Just presence. She used the coins carefully. Only when needed. The ring she kept with her, not for its value, but for what it represented. A reminder that someone before her had felt the same emptiness, and had stayed long enough to understand it. Months later, the cabin looked different. Not new, but alive. And Mara felt different too. Not fixed, not complete, but stronger. Quieter in a way that felt steady instead of empty. One evening, she sat outside the cabin, watching the sun lower into the horizon, the sky turning soft shades of gold and red, the same silence, but it no longer felt heavy. She thought about her grandfather, about the things he never explained fully, about the way he had trusted her to understand in her own time, and she realized something. The place had not changed her life because of what it gave her. It changed her because it made her stay. Stay long enough to see. Stay long enough to listen. Stay long enough to become someone who no longer needed to run. If this story meant something to you, consider subscribing and being part of this journey with us. And tell us in the comments, have you ever found something in a place where you least expected it? Take care, and we will see you in the next story.